This is Dina Alexander from Educate and Empower Kids, and I have Anne Blythe of Betrayal Trauma Recovery, and we are going to be talking about a very serious topic. We are talking about peer-on-peer abuse, and what brought this around was kind of different, kind of interesting. My daughter had broken up with a boy that she was dating, and started to, we had talked about it, of course, on and off. And then she found out that perhaps he had maybe cheated on her, high school though, right? Kissing other girls, nothing, sexual or crazy. But anywho, she met with that other girl and they started comparing notes. And then what happened was that the language that they were both using as she was describing this conversation was what I had heard almost exactly from the ladies who are on the Betrayal Trauma Recovery page. And these are women who have been married for 5, 10, 20, 30 years. And so they have had a partner who has cheated it, but has also typically abused them, all kinds of different terrible, very difficult things to deal with. But that I was hearing what my daughter was saying sounded like these women about the gaslighting, about the way this boy would turn things on her. And it freaked me out. I thought, how is a 17-year-old boy already learning how to behave this way? How is this possible? And so it was like the next day I was like, we got to talk about this. And I got to talk to Anne. Anne's got to be in on this. And so we're going to just dive right in to what is going on, not just with my daughter and at my daughter's high school and all around, but at probably every high school in this country. And I really feel like this happens because our culture has been grooming kids. It happens at such a high frequency because the culture is grooming our kids in a certain way, particularly with pornography. But Anne, could you tell us, how do you feel like the culture grooms our girls, grooms our kids for abuse?
I think there is a overwhelming situation. Sorry, I just saw my name pop up there. Did you see that? Anyway, okay. So there's an overwhelming situation where women feel like they have to be a certain way in order to get a man. So they have to be cool. They have to be low maintenance. They have to be beautiful. They have to be smart, right? There's all these things that women feel like, I need to be this way in order to catch a man. And similarly, on the men's side, they feel like women need to act and be a certain way in order to be a desirable girlfriend, right? And so a lot of the times there's things that happen and women feel them, or teenagers feel them, and they think that's kind of weird, or I don't really feel comfortable with that. But the way that society has taught women how to dismiss their intuition and to dismiss their own needs and say, well, in order to be likable or in order to be lovable, I need to be cool. I need to be understanding. I need to be progressive. I need to be this or that. And they're shutting down what they actually need and how they actually feel. Because it doesn't feel good to be in an abusive relationship, whether you're a teenager or whether you're an adult. And the abuse is so subtle that it's really hard to pick up on what's happening. So I want to talk about the 4 pillars of abuse here, if that
Awesome. That would be great.
We start with that. Okay. So the first pillar is entitlement and objectification. We see that a lot with pornography. Men feel entitled to women's bodies and they objectify them, right? So this is what a woman can do for me. She can look good on my arm. She can provide physical intimacy. She can provide companionship. And it's all about what she can do for me. I'm entitled to these things that she gives me. And she's sort of an object, kind of like your surfboard or another object, right? That does things.
A good car.
That does things for you. And that's the first pillar, is that you feel entitled to certain behaviors or certain ways of them interacting with you and that you see them as an object. The second pillar is manipulation, control, and lies. Now, the biggest form of lies that happen in this scenario are that they're lying about who they are. And that is an effort to control the situation. And that is grooming at its finest, right?
Absolutely.
I am a church-going, kind, nice guy who doesn't participate in pornography, who doesn't swear, who, this is how I look, but in the background, they really are doing abusive behaviors and they're acting in abusive ways. So that facade that they're putting on is grooming. And it's hard for people to see and understand because the facade is all they see.
Absolutely.
So,
And that is I'm glad you brought that up because that is huge. Because I think we are taught so often to put on a facade, not just at church, but at school. And it's almost, I don't know, in this culture, I feel like it's because of social media, it's almost been considered healthy, right? That is, I'm supposed to look this way. And everyone, oh, they're just such a good kid. And yeah, I'm like, they are good kids, but there's some kids that aren't so great. And there's terrible things going on. So
yeah, if they're participating in abusive behaviors, it doesn't, a good person can participate in abusive behaviors and that makes them abusive.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
And so what we need to do is make sure that we are calling this out for what it is to protect victims, not to, just be mean to him for no reason. We're trying to protect people from abusive behaviors and that we need to start very, very early. And we need to call it out for what it is and say, this is unacceptable. And if you do these things, these are the boundaries we're going to set. Right. And so that control and manipulation and lies isn't like the typical kind of controlling, like grabbing someone's arm or controlling their transportation or controlling their money that you often hear about in abuse situations. It's more of I'm going to control your perception of me. I'm going to control reality here. So that when I do these insidious, small little gaslighting techniques or lie to you, you come out the crazy person because I have already shown publicly to not just you, but to everyone around us that I am a really good guy and they're never going to believe you. Right. So that's a form of grooming.
And especially us as parents, it's hard for us to recognize some of that because again, so much of relationships is happening on social media or through texting. Mm-hmm. So there's certain language and certain things that I think there's subtleties that we haven't learned because unless we have been in an abusive relationship, because that's not how we text. That's not how we share information. So I think that's something that could like slip by a lot of parents as well.
Yeah. To learn more about stuff like that, you can visit btr.org, our site, or there's a really good book called Why Does He Do That by Lundy Bancroft. If you read that book, and I recommend everybody does, you'll be able to start seeing it. Like once you're done with that book, you'll be like, yep. And you'll just see it everywhere. But before I read it, it was really actually kind of hard to determine. The third pillar of abuse is compulsive behaviors. So this is where someone is consistently and over time choosing something else that's not important and harmful, like pornography or some other, video games maybe, could be gambling. I don't know. Any compulsive behavior that they're choosing over a relationship that is harming the relationship. So
yeah, absolutely.
It could be golf. Right? I mean, maybe a wife is at home with 7 kids and she's been working her butt off all week long and her husband is never home because he's either working or golfing. That I wouldn't say that's necessarily abusive, but that's what we're talking about. Anything that someone cannot access you because of your compulsive behavior. And pornography is, and I would say pornography and video games are probably just right up there on the list of compulsive behaviors that are abusive to a relationship and harmful to a relationship. And the last one is a lack of accountability. So that's the fourth pillar of abuse. And a lack of accountability is that when you confront them about this abusive behavior, hey, you lied to me, right? You told me that you didn't maybe say, I'm not a porn user. I am a good guy. Maybe you didn't say that, but your whole entire facade was deceptive, right?
Absolutely.
And so you have been grooming me and you have been deceiving me. Maybe that's what they say. And they'd be like, no, I haven't. I don't know what you're talking about. You're crazy. Well, you did this and you did that, right? A lack of accountability is both a manipulative technique, but it's also just a lack of accountability. They're refusing to acknowledge what they've done or what has happened. And this gets really confusing for abuse victims because they start to get accused of things. And so then abuse victims think, okay, well, do I need to take accountability for this? And it's really says a lot about abuse victims that a lot of them do. And they start taking accountability for things that aren't theirs to take accountability for. So when you're talking to abuse victims, it's really important to help them sort that out so that they don't start taking accountability for things that they are not responsible for. right?
Exactly.
And that,
Especially, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
oh, I was going to say, and these things can happen as early as, junior high, high school, even
Oh,
elementary.
absolutely. I was going to say, because I'm like, what you're saying, I'm like, it's already difficult for us as adults. But again, those teenagers, middle schoolers, undeveloped brain, trying to deal and figure out these behaviors, because my daughter talked about some of that where she would ask him and she happened to be right on that. Yes, this boy was having a relationship with another girl and, excuse me, yeah. And that, but he was like, I love you. Like, and that hurts me that you would say that or that you would accuse me. And I'm like, using these very loving, kind words basically as a weapon,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's so incredibly creepy. And we just don't think of kids as being capable of doing that, and I've, like recently, I'm sure a lot of people have seen that documentary, Abducted in Plain Sight. Now, I'm not going to say anything about the parents because to me, those parents should be in jail. But you could see in this documentary how this little girl was taking that kind of responsibility that you mentioned, that she was part of this, that's part of that grooming process. That's part of that creating this relationship. So maybe I wanted that. Maybe I signed up for this. And so I don't have a right to complain, or this is just the way it is, or this is just the way he shows love, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, no, it is wrong on so many levels. I just want to hit real quick about some of the other things that our kids are going through. You mentioned about the culture and with pornography. And I recently heard Marianne Layden say something along the lines of, if we wanted to teach violence, if we wanted to teach abuse, we could not have created a better teacher than pornography. We couldn't have created a better environment in which one person is behaving in such a selfish, narcissistic way, and where somebody is the victim, as it were, or the person who is being dominated, the woman usually, is accepting of that or never says no, and how the woman she sees herself as, in pornography, she portrays somebody who's only exists to be sexy, and I'm surprised over and over again. I don't know why I keep getting surprised at this, at the younger and younger kids who think that their value lies in their sexuality, right? In being sexy. And that never ends there. And that is something that parents don't seem to understand, that I would love parents to understand better with putting their kids on social media, with allowing their kids to see R-rated things or even sometimes PG-13 things, that for the child's brain, that it doesn't just stop at I want to look good and be sexy. That translates into I need to be sexually available, right? I need to be okay, like you said, being cool with sharing nudes, with trading nudes, with giving a blowjob at the age of 13 or 14, even though we're not in any kind of serious relationship,
Right.
Even is what I'm saying.
Well,
not that I'm
even
saying
with just being low maintenance.
Yes.
I mean, even with that, right? Like, well, don't be dramatic. Right? Like,
yeah.
it sets women up to be dismissed, basically, because you can't be dramatic, you can't be high maintenance, you can't be this, you can't be that. What you need to be is attractive.
Yeah. And the perfect example of that is an article that was in Cosmo a few years ago about like hookup sex. And like part of it was kind of like, oh, it's okay to have coffee, but don't stay for breakfast. Like, you don't want to be a bother. And I was like, and I'm, of course, as a mom, I'm thinking, yeah, you've just allowed the use of your body to a near stranger or a stranger, but you're not allowed to stay for breakfast. That's too much. You're just being clingy then.
Exactly.
But this is what we are teaching girls over and over.
Yeah.
So what are some other ways that you have seen teens harassing or abusing? Like, what do you think, or just help parents understand, what are some of the other forms of abuse that are going on middle schools, high schools?
I hope this answers your question, but I want to talk right now about this shame thing going on, where people say, if someone talks to you about their porn use, you need to react in a certain way. Okay, now I'm talking about peers. I'm not talking about parents, right?
Yeah.
Parents know that it's best to not freak out, right? Like to listen and to be available. But it's in terms of peers, when you're talking about either a husband-wife relationship or a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, you're talking about a relationship of equals here, okay? Yeah. And a lot of this is going on all over the place. If someone comes to you about their porn use, make sure that you don't get angry, don't freak out, be kind or whatever. that actually sets them up for abuse as well. And this is why. Someone comes to you and says to you, I've been lying to you, right? Or I've been hiding my true self from you for a year, or whatever it is. And you're a peer to them. You have a right to be angry. You have a right to be upset. You can express your emotions. Instead of saying to people, instead of putting the burden on the victim to react the right way, we need to be teaching people are going to be upset because you've done something that hurts people.
Yeah.
Right. And it's okay if you're upset, and then and they might need to set some boundaries around you and your behaviors until your behavior improves, or until you're able to be honest, or until you're able to live with integrity. We need to put the burden of this on the perpetrator, or on the user, or on the person who's exhibiting unhealthy behaviors, rather than on the victims. And I think that's another way that victims continue to be abused. So if a girl goes to someone and says, hey, and I'm speaking in a gender segregated way here. On our site, we only deal with victims of abuse.
Well, I mean, and it's, to me, that's fine, because typically it is, at least right now, for the time being, it is typically more.
Yeah, we do know that it happens with men, but a lot of the abusive men accuse the women of being abusive, and then it gets really confusing. And that is actually not the case. It's another way of just abusing her. So that's why it gets very tricky. So you need to know what it looks like. But women need to know that they can react, and the perpetrators need to know that people are going to react badly. Like, if I'm afraid of telling the truth because people are going to react badly, I have to tell the truth anyway to get out of this, because the women are being told you have to look and act a certain way in order to help him, rather than having her recognize what her needs are for safety and how to get those needs met. And I think that's really important. And I think that's adding to the abusive nature of the situation, that victims are being told to be tolerant of the abuse, or to be kind to their abuser. And that just doesn't work. You can't love, serve, and forgive someone out of abusing you. It never works. You have to set a boundary.
Yeah. Well, and what I'm saying too is that, again, and I mean, and this goes back to the same kind of thing, is that what's been happening for generations and generations, that when a girl does speak up, it's poo-pooed. She's not believed. She's slut shamed. Even if it's obvious that this was a boy perpetrating her, or like when it comes to sharing nudes, which to me, at least that's what I am seeing a lot in my community as a form of abuse, is boys, sharing, sexualized or nude photos of other teenagers. And that even to the point of where they gamify it, right? Where one girl for a certain level of hotness gets a certain number, right? And that boy is trading. To me, this is absolute abuse, and that this is sexually deviant and inappropriate behavior. But
Absolutely.
Of course, we rarely go after those boys for, like, how dare you do that? It's always the girl. Why would you share that picture? Even though sometimes she is blackmailed, or she is embarrassed, or she is shamed, or she is guilted, or pushed into that, coerced into that, into doing that. And so there's that. And what I see a lot of, again, with my kids, what they tell me, or what I'm seeing a lot of, is just this expectation, like, for girls to do more than they want to do sexually, more than kiss, more than be touched somewhere, that it's like their boundaries are constantly being pushed. And that is where I worry that, again, if we are not talking to our kids, if we are not giving them a reality check of what a healthy, good relationship should look like, then they're not going to know, because those hundreds and thousands of voices on social media, in pornography, in movies, in advertisements, are teaching them that, like you said, they got to be cool with it. They need to be low maintenance. So that brings me to my next question is, so what can parents do? What do you think? What can we teach our kids? There might be things that maybe moms can do and dads can do, or, what should we be doing, teaching our kids?
I think we need to start having conversations, very direct conversations about these issues with examples, right? Like talking about, okay, What is reality? I know that sounds very weird, but like, what is consent? What does yes or no mean? And the Educate and Empower books that we have in our home, like 30 Days of Sex Talks and How to Talk About Pornography, are really good resources, right? So I want to plug those. Yes.
Thanks.
They're very good. We use them in my home.
Thanks.
And so I taught, I don't know if I did this on our last webinar, but I taught my 9-year-old about consent, which is like now biting me in the butt, because every time I try to get him to do something, he's like, Mom, you don't have my consent. And I'm like, oh, you have to wash the dishes. And he's like, I have to get my consent to get me to wash the dishes. And I'm like, oh, this is not what I meant. But we have conversations about consent. When we're watching TV, if there's any little thing that happens, I always stop it and talk to them about it. And they're young, but we have conversations, and they're layered and they're ongoing about these issues. And there's stuff in the news all the time. There's current events. There's things that happen at home. I think don't be afraid to use these words, right? Don't be afraid to say this is what consent is. I mean, how many kids even know what it is? Right? I don't know. My kids know what it is because I talked to them about it. But for listeners who are watching right now, if your kids got home and you said, talk to me about consent, what is that? Then, and just see where they're at. But in order to do that, we have to have a pretty good grasp of what those things are ourselves. We have to be healthy ourselves. And this is where something like Betrayal Trauma Recovery comes into play, because I have so many people who want to protect their children against pornography, right? But they don't realize maybe that their husband is actually using it, and that there are some unhealthy patterns and abusive patterns happening in their own home around this. They might not know it, or they might know it, but they haven't had the courage to face it or to confront it. And so they're trying to protect their kids while not setting a boundary around this abusive behavior in their home. That's never going to work, because you're just talking, but you're not actually able to show them an example of what that looks like. So I'd say that it has to start there. The more healthy the parents can get, the better they're going to be able to be examples, and the easier it is to talk about. I mean, if you have an issue with consent, like if you're a dad who's continually coercing your wife into having sex when she doesn't really want to, are you going to be able to have a great conversation with your son about consent? No, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's really important, that the parents need to realize that the key to their kids' mental health and sexual health is to increase their own health.
Absolutely. So talking about consent, talking about various topics, and then, like you said, setting an example. Totally agree. I think also it's important for each of us to just continually remind ourselves that we cannot say, not in my home, not in my neighborhood, not at my school. Every congregation, every soccer team, every scout troop, every, home has that potential, unfortunately. As I've said before, 90% of sexual abuse happens from the people we know. Mm-hmm. I also think it's really important to give your kids a safety plan, right? They're at someone's house, someone's making them uncomfortable. What can they do? Now, this is not fail-safe. This is not foolproof. Things happen that are out of our control. But I think having a plan and talking to your kids, in giving them various situations, having them role play. Okay, I'm sitting next to you and I start touching your leg. I put my arm around you and I start touching your breast. What should we do about that? So that they have something very specific. So they have the words to say, so they have the actions to do. I remember when I was a kid hearing about fire, learning about fire safety. And it freaked me out as a kid. I think I was 5 or 6. And they encouraged us, I remember as kids, to have like a backpack with supplies, almost like a little 72-hour kit, right, to get out. Putting together that kit helped me feel safe. We never had a fire in our home, but I felt safe having that right near my bed, like in the closet. And it's the same kind of thing, because these are tough topics. When you start talking to your kids, it's going to be scary. When you let them know that there are things that happen right in our neighborhood, that there are things that have happened, that your aunt so-and-so had this happen to her, that your brother had this happen, that these are very real things that happen to 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 5 boys. Mm-hmm. They need to have a plan, that they need to have a safe word to call you with. I know that I also really recommend holding off on smartphones as much as possible. Give your kid a flip phone if they need it. This is a very unpopular thing in our culture right now. Everybody wants to be the good mom and the good dad by giving their kid a smartphone. That is the worst thing you can do for your kids. Hold off as long as possible. I have a sophomore in high school right now that wants social media. And I recently had to tell him, we're going to wait until your senior year. And he looked at me really surprised because, of course, even as, boys are not quite as interested, but they want it. But I let him know, like, the research is pouring in. Like, we made a mistake giving it to your sister at age 13. We screwed up on that. Okay. It never helped. I see the depression. I see the comparisons. I see that continual need to grab and check and make sure I'm not missing something or whatever, that we need to hold off on that. Mm-hmm. So that is a big thing I like to push for parents. I also think it's really important to provide some normative social experiences, meaning that you show your kids what a date should look like, that you show your kids what a party should look like, what dinner should look like, what a healthy relationship should look like. So you're going to continue those conversations, like Polly said, talking about intimacy, relationships, love, respect, but you're showing them too, and showing them what they should expect from a partner, what is not okay from a partner. What are the things that are acceptable? And like Polly said, what are things that are abusive? How might a coercion look on a date? What can I say? Can I decide ahead of time, I'm going to kiss a girl or kiss a boy, and that's it, I'm done. I'm not going to allow myself to be touched in a way that I am not comfortable with. Or maybe even if it does feel good, maybe I am still going to hold off because there are consequences to my actions. There's a consequence to how the relationship is going to progress. Last thing before we're kind of we're out of time. What can we do if we know, that something has happened to one of our kids? If we feel, or if we are concerned that maybe something has happened to our kids, that they have had some sexual abuse, what do you think a parent can do?
That is heartbreaking when that happens. And it's hard to know what to do. It's hard to know who would be the best therapist to take them to, for example, or where.
Let's start there. What are some things that we can look for if we maybe suspect? What are some of the signs that you know of
for children,
for kids, teenagers, that they've been abused?
Starting to isolate. Yeah. And starting to act a little bit differently. The interesting thing is they're kind of the same signs that you would look for to know if someone is using pornography. And I think that's really interesting because they are being abused by the pornography, right? So they're either viewing pornography and they're being abused that way, or they're being abused by someone else.
But it actually makes sense. Because again, I was recently watching something from the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, and one of the speakers talked about how it is when somebody has been sexually abused, there is like more of a chance that they will abuse. But as if I have been physically abused, there's not that same correlation that I am going to physically, or if I have been verbally abused, it's not the immediate correlation as there is with sexual abuse.
And with sexual abuse, it may be because it feels good. Right?
Yeah. Just because the wiring in our brain,
just because you're having maybe a sexual experience and maybe it feels good to you does not mean that you're not being sexually abused.
Absolutely.
And so
can you repeat that? Because to me, that is so important for parents to understand when it comes to their kids.
Just because you are being abused and it feels good doesn't mean it's not abuse. That's the same thing with pornography. Pornography is interesting, right? And it feels good to masturbate when you view pornography. That's why people do it. If it didn't feel good, they wouldn't do it, obviously. But it doesn't mean that teenagers are not being abused by the pornography when they're doing it. It's just because it feels good doesn't mean it's good for you, and it doesn't mean it's not abusive. So I think you're going to see many of those same signs: isolation, personality changes. Maybe not personality changes, but mood
a little
swings.
bit. No, for sure. A little bit. Being withdrawn, for sure.
Irritability.
Not interested in the same things they were interested in before.
And it's hard with kids because they go through phases and we don't know. And my biggest fear is that they wouldn't tell me, or that they feel like even if they told me that I wouldn't be able to do anything about it, which in some cases is true. I mean, even if you like press charges or something, the person could not be held accountable. So it is a pretty scary place to be. But I think that if we keep an eye on our kids and we we do the best we can. That's all we can do. And we hopefully don't have to be stuck in this like dark place where we think, oh, I can't do anything. With my own children, I just try to be open and caring and loving and hope that they'll talk to me about anything that happens. And I'm not a child expert when it comes to child sexual abuse. So, I mean, that might be something that you want to have someone on to show more signs. But I would like when that happens for you to say, do you notice all these like signs they're saying? This is also the same signs that would happen if they're using pornography.
No, absolutely. And it is terrible and it's sad. And, I've known a number of parents that have gone through this. And the biggest thing that they say is, like you mentioned briefly, is finding the right therapist. We sometimes think that it's a one size fits all, or this therapist is available. I live in a particular area that it is very hard to find mental health help, especially for kids. All of the therapists are swamped. They are all busy. They are all overwhelmed, but they are not all experts. They are not all good therapists. They are not all experts in sexual abuse. And sometimes they are not even using evidence-based therapy, right? For you, that particular, you need to find somebody. If something has happened to your child, find somebody who is going to be using evidence-based treatment, okay? Because evidence-based treatment doesn't take months and years. We're talking weeks and maybe possibly a few months. And that's something that I think parents, again, don't realize. We think that, okay, we're going to, something happened to them and we're going to put them in therapy for the next 3 years. It doesn't have to be like that. But often there does need to be interaction where it's not just the child going to therapy and, okay, yeah, you go fix my child. There usually needs to be involvement, family therapy or parent and child therapy. Like you said, there's just a lot of, there's good resources out there. But again, as parents, we need to just keep doing our best. We're not going to be able to do this perfectly, but just keep trying.
Absolutely. We have found that a lot with therapists, that it is really hit and miss. A lot of therapists don't see pornography as an abuse issue. And you need to make sure that you find a therapist that sees it as an abuse issue in order to be able to help your family. And that's how we see it at Betrayal Trauma Recovery. We see porn users as engaging in abusive behaviors, and their wives, who are the innocent spouse, as the victim. And the clients that come to us to get help with their husband's porn use or their husband's abusive behaviors, they've usually been to about 7 therapists or something. And also they're going to like 6 sessions try to describe the abusive behaviors, and the therapists aren't getting it. And so if you are listening right now and that is you, and you're trying to navigate your husband's abuse in relation to his porn use and his infidelity, please come to visit our site. It's btr.org for Betrayal Trauma Recovery. So btr.org.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Polly. Thank you for sharing, because that is a really important resource. And it is. And if you have trouble finding the words to help a therapist understand how pornography is not healthy, is not helpful, whether you are just concerned because your child is using pornography, or if you're concerned that that might be an issue in the abuse, do a little research. Look on btr.org, look at Educate Empower Kids. We have described several throughout articles, throughout lessons, to help you be able to talk and give you the words to explain how this is not healthy, how this is harmful to individuals, to couples, to families, and to our whole culture. So thank you for watching. If you need more conversations, like we said, we have our 30 days of sex talks where we talk about abuse, where we talk about ways to keep safe. We are doing a book giveaway today. If you like and share today's webinar, you are eligible to get any one of our books for free. So that includes any of our children's books, that includes the How to Talk to Your Kids About Pornography, whatever. Any of our books are available for this giveaway. We're giving away a couple of them today. So like and share. Check out btr.org, Betrayal Trauma Recovery, and they have a great Facebook page as well. So thank you so much for watching.